Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hey friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for sharing the podcast. Our good friend Scott Schara is with us today. The website, ouramazinggrace.net. There it is. There's always new information, new links. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is a recent documentary that came out. It's called Authorized to Kill. It's an unvaxxed. There it is. Or Vaxxed 3, Authorized to Kill. So we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk also about just some updates. If you have been following along with us as we've had Scott on in the past, he's got a lawsuit going on regarding the death of his daughter, Grace, who was 19, who was killed due to COVID protocols. And we're going to bring him in and explain that for you newer viewers that may not know the story. Scott Schara, welcome to Worldview Matters. Good to see you, brother.
Well, it's fantastic to see you. When I first got started, you were in the
one of the first
3 or 4 interviews I had back in December of 21, and now it's almost 1,000 interviews.
Wasn't it number 2?
Yeah, you may have been number 2. I think Newsmax was first,
and then me.
You.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Scott, not that I want to say, all right, I was almost number 1. So in a couple days, it will be the 3rd anniversary of Grace being in heaven.
Yes.
Because that was October 13 in 2021. Almost 3 years ago. It doesn't seem possible. So for people that don't know your story, briefly bullet point what happened to Grace in the hospital during COVID.
I do want to say, Grace had Down syndrome. She was the best thing God ever gave us, second to salvation. And how she even came about was Cindy and I, we were 39 years old, and we were chasing the American dream, but decided to turn the baby department over to God. And in his sovereign will, he gave us Grace.
What a blessing.
And we named Grace after God's grace, and she was an angel. We celebrated her golden birthday on September 22nd. She would have been 22. So Grace was killed when she was 19 on October 13th of 2021. And what happened is, and this is what got me really into the research that I've been doing, is it had nothing to do with COVID. She was given a lethal combination of meds that you use to euthanize somebody when they're in hospice care. She was given Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine. And those meds should not be given. And when we started really digging into her death, not only was she given those meds, but when it came time to revive her, we found out she was listed DNR, do not resuscitate. We found out that the doctor put an illegal do not resuscitate order on Grace's chart.
Because it was against your wishes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when it came time to revive Grace, none of the medical staff would even come in the room. Wow. And so at that point, Jessica was in the room as Grace's advocate. I had been taken out of the room 3 days earlier by an armed guard. And ultimately, we watched Grace die on that FaceTime call while we're screaming to the nurses in the hallway to save our daughter.
Help. Yeah.
And because of that, what has happened, David, is I become, as you know, a full-time researcher and advocate, and dug into what the heck is really going on.
Protocols killed. And who decides what the protocols are, Scott? Is it that the hospitals? Is it the government? The NIH? Who decides what these protocols are in the case of COVID?
Well, ultimately, it's the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. During COVID, that was a unique time because there was a public health emergency that dictated these, quote, standards of care that were filtered down through the FDA. So then the standards of care with COVID, most people are familiar with remdesivir and ventilators. Well, those standards of care, remdesivir had a 75% kill rate. The ventilator had a 90% kill rate. So you should call them standards of death, not standards of care.
Right.
But this concept of standards of care has been going on since the early 80s. And it comes down from Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. This is the big reveal that I want the entire population to know. And so you might think to yourself, I'm not on Medicare or Medicaid, so it doesn't impact me. Well, it does, because what happens is if a doctor is part of the system, so they accept Medicare and Medicaid patients, that means the doctor's entire patient population has to submit to these standards of care. And as an example, the standard of care for cancer, most people would know, is radiation, chemo, or cutting.
Right.
Well, chemo has a 97.9% kill rate. The doctor doesn't tell you that, and we've all been programmed that if you get cancer, you have to have chemo. Well, most cancer has been cured. And I brought this book along. I just want to quote from it. In 1984, 9 MDs were writing, and they wrote this book called Dissent in Medicine. And
What is it called?
Dissent in Medicine.
Okay.
They were exposing standards of care.
Wow.
All the way back in 84, but
Okay.
nobody would listen. And the reason nobody would listen is because this is a spiritual battle. And they were using reason. So here's what they wrote regarding cancer, David. They wrote, the entire field of orthodox oncology will disappear as chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation for cancer are revealed as fundamentally irrational and scientifically insupportable. So they already knew these standards of care were wrong. They
40
were
years
killing
ago.
people already 40 years ago.
Wow.
And then their conclusion, this is really a fantastic conclusion when you consider these are MDs writing this, and they knew. They said a patient stands a better chance of recovering if he is never diagnosed.
Wow.
That's a shocker. But this all comes down from Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So this is the federal government controlling healthcare. That's illegal. That is illegal in our country, but they do it, and they do it through their standard of care reimbursement rates. And so ultimately they're controlling the entire medical industrial establishment.
And I know we talked on several podcasts about how much money the hospitals were getting from the government, the incentives for the COVID protocols. That's available on your website where?
If you look in under the tragedy tab, is death. That's where that original research is. The research has expanded much since then.
The
and so-
tragedy.
Right. And my deprogramming with Grace's dad tab on the website that's where you can follow the continuing research as it keeps growing and growing and growing as to how nefarious this is and how long they have been putting this agenda together.
So that's at ouramazinggrace.and that's under the tragedy. The love of money is really what we're talking about there. So, Scott, let's briefly get into the lawsuit. You've got an update that you sent out a while back, and you filed it in 2023, April 2023.
Correct.
Just kind of take us through some of the bullet points of that. I mean, this is David versus Goliath, and most people would not have the time, the energy, the money, the resources to do this. Go ahead and share that part of the battle.
Yeah, it truly is David versus Goliath. And on top of that, it is in the Antichrist legal system and the shenanigans that the defense pulls. We could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
But, we filed in April of 23. In July of 23 and October of 23, there were hearings to entertain motions to dismiss. Praise God, the judge did not allow any of the motions to dismiss to carry. So we've got the entire lawsuit proceeding. In May, we had the first round of depositions. So our daughter Jessica, Cindy, and my depositions were done in May. And then after Cindy's deposition, this was quite an interesting twist in the case. The defense attorney said, we are not proceeding with the doctors and nurses' depositions next week unless Scott signs a gag order. Now, I already had these attorneys flown in. All right. And so they had the proverbial gun to our head. And so then we said, we will do that. We're not going to sign a permanent gag order, but we'll sign a temporary gag order with the condition that you take this to the judge and he decides. So then,
the gag order, meaning you can't talk about this case or
the
what?
depositions.
The depositions.
I can't talk about the doctor and nurse's depositions.
Okay.
So just wrap your head around that. If they're telling the truth, why can't I talk about them? Right? There should be no reason. It's interesting to have, I sat through every single deposition and to see how they manipulate and directly lie It's shocking.
Wow.
They're all under oath. But this is why they don't want me to talk. I mean, they already have learned I'm outspoken. They spent, my deposition was 16 hours. They spent about 5 hours of that deposition criticizing what I've been publishing, trying to make me look crazy. And
You're just one of these conspiracy theorists, right? And by the way, how many interviews have you done?
We're approaching 1,000 right now.
Okay, go ahead. So the deposition gag order lifted.
So we agreed to that temporary with that condition. The judge had the hearing on July 29th. He released the gag order.
Okay.
So now I'm free to release the transcript and the audio. He did put a gag order on their video.
Okay.
So they had presented this case that, people will go to their homes if their mugshots are out on the internet and things like that. So praise God that I'm not under a gag order any longer. But the other thing that is really a major piece to the case, so you remember our original jury trial was set for November 4th.
Right.
And that got moved to June 2nd.
Of next year.
And the reason is because during the main doctor's deposition, Dr. Shokar, he brought up another doctor, which we knew about, but we didn't know his role. And so he brought up the role, and that triggered something I had not heard of before called the empty chair defense. And so the legal team right away said, Scott, I think we're going to have to sue this additional doctor, which would add a sixth doctor to the case, Dr. Gendev. I said, well, I'm more interested in timing versus adding a sixth doctor. It doesn't help us. And then they said, well, there's a legal principle called the empty chair defense. So when we're at trial, if the doctors and nurses throw Dr. Gendev under the bus and the jury decides that he's 51% liable, we lose. So we had to add him. And by adding him, of course, that extends the trial because now he has to hire an attorney and prep and all of that.
Oh, my goodness.
June 2nd of 2025 is the new trial date. Based on, as you and I were talking off air, the shenanigans that continue to go on. I don't even know if that's going to be firm yet, but we're in here for the long haul.
Oh, my goodness.
It is grinding.
It's wearing you down.
It is wearing me down, but it's not going to kill me because God opened this door for a reason. And so even though we are in the Antichrist system, he opened this door for a reason. And so we are being obedient. We told him when we jumped in, whatever doors you open, we'll walk through.
Friends, we're going to take a pause right here, but I want you to pray for Scott and Cindy, Schara, and Jess as they go through this because they need perseverance, they need God's grace, but they also need the strength and just the encouragement to press on. I just can't imagine this battle. I hear him explain all the things they've been through. I would get their newsletter and I read it and I'm exhausted just thinking about it. But here's Scott's perspective and then we'll take a break. He said the gag order was an expensive detour designed to wear us down. Thankfully, God's got this, as Grace would say. We praise God for this opportunity to share truth so Grace's death and countless others are not in vain. We'll be right back with Scott Schara on Worldview Matters.
Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream.
Get free activation now with promo code DAVID. Hey friends, thank you so much for those of you following us on Rumble. The channel is growing thanks to you. If you're not, please do. If you're on social media and you're on Rumble, follow us there, Freedom Project. Also, download the Freedom Project Media app for free. That's right. It's worth every penny. No, it really is. So thanks, guys. We are growing, and we praise God for every new viewer and listener to the audio podcast and every person that donates. And your prayers are most welcome because of the spiritual warfare that is ongoing, as you know. So we're talking with Scott Schara. The website is ouramazinggrace.net. Scott, there's another. We've had you on a couple times. We've had Jeff Wagner on to talk about Breaking the Oath. It was a documentary that came out. Was it last year or the year before?
It was May of 23.
23. Okay, last year. So we went to the premiere at the Cinema in De Pere. Great. Breaking the Oath. Check that out, friends. But now there's a new one called Vaxxed 3, or also Authorized to Kill. Tell us a little bit about that and where people can watch it, because evidently it's available to the public now.
Yes. So it was live in theaters for one night only, September 18th. We went to Green Bay as a family. The theater was packed.
Awesome.
It was a lot like going to De Pere,
Yeah.
where you're getting all the comments while the film is rolling. It was absolutely awesome. And then we spent hours afterward talking with people that were in the theater.
That's great.
But the Children's Health Defense really they stepped out and really put something together that's risky because it's truthful. The truth is risky, right?
Yep.
And they have exposed not just the vaccine agenda in this film, which that's been being exposed by a number of people, but they also exposed the hospital murders. And this is the first public film on a nationwide basis that has done that. And they interviewed me for the film in June. I was at a legal conference in Denver, and they interviewed me for the film there. So Grace's story is in the film. They used some of my research in the film, which I was really humbled that they would look to me for that. But we're in this hospital murder lane trying to expose it.
Yeah.
And it's real. It's still going on today. As you and I were talking, my wife Cindy is in Chippewa Falls right now.
That's Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin,
Yep.
trying to help a special needs lady who's 59 years old get out of the hospital. She was not prepared. And because she was not prepared with her paperwork and having an advocate, the state assigned her a guardian. And these standards of care, as I mentioned, are designed to kill people.
Wow.
Cindy was playing Yahtzee with her. They were tweaking her. She got put on a vent. So that's another nefarious action. And they're tweaking the vent settings. She had a real small reaction. She's literally playing Yahtzee with her, David. And then they inject her with lorazepam and morphine and knocked her out. So this stuff is still
Cindy
going on.
was in the room?
Well, Cindy was in the room. Yes.
What was their reasoning for doing that?
I wish I knew. I mean, I can't answer the reasoning other than there is an agenda that almost everybody is blind to. Last week, they came in and wanted to give her the COVID flu jab. Okay, praise God, Cindy was in the room and stopped it because the lady can't talk. She's got a vent in.
Oh, my goodness.
So
This is criminal, Scott.
it is criminal.
And it's not being, where's the accountability? I think, is this a good transition to talk about your billboard?
Yeah, I think it would be great.
Friends, will you survive a hospital stay? Where's that billboard? Jeff, bring that up. This is the brand new billboard. Will you survive a hospital stay? medicalmurder.net. That's a redirect to your website, ouramazinggrace.net. Medical murder is the number one cause of death in the U.S. by design. Would you briefly explain that?
You probably remember because you and I talked about that when I published that research. It was just over a year ago I finished that project. It was about 1,000 hours, and I dug into the fact that that's why I can say it as a fact. Medical murder is the number one cause of death in the United States, and it's by design. I broke it down as a research project. So I went through who, what, where, why, how, and when. All those things, and then closed with the seventh part is now what? Now that you know that this is true, What are you going to do about it?
So briefly explain, people go into the hospital for whatever it might be. Maybe a surgery, maybe they need something, maybe it's a virus. They go in, they're in the hospital. So you say it's the number one cause of death. What happens when they're in the hospital? Is it wrong care, wrong protocol? Is it malicious? Is it some people just following the administrator's, order, directives? What is it that leads to their death when it's not necessary?
It's all of that and maybe more. And let me start with an example of what happened. So after this lady this was just a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
I'm going to actually step back and set this up because we did not know this lady. the family got a hold of us because she ended up at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, same hospital Grace was murdered at. They had heard the story and said, could you go visit her? So this was roughly 6 weeks ago. So Cindy and I went to go visit her. We'd never met her. We got to the hospital at 6:55 in the evening. Cindy called to get the room number because she had just gotten out of surgery. And so we got the room number. We really didn't know where this was, but also we realized, oh my gosh, this is the same wing in the same floor that Grace was on. We got in the room. We were in the room with her 10 minutes, and 2 armed guards showed up and removed us. So,
because you're so dangerous, right?
Because we're
a threat. You're a threat.
We're the hospital bandits. So, so if you just think this through, how is that possible? How can they put a restraining order on somebody without a restraining order?
Just visiting a patient.
It's because the rule of law is dead. And the rule of law presumes that you're going to have people who are going to look out for the patient's best interest in the medical situation. That's what we're talking about. But it's being broken all over the place. All right, so now in a hospital situation, the first thing that they want you to do is sign over your rights. So they present you with this little fake pad, right? And you're supposed to sign that. Well, you're signing over your rights to turn your care over to the doctor. Well, you're assuming because of the programming, the doctor is going to care for you with the best interests of the patient in mind. Remember the Hippocratic Oath. I think you and I have talked about that.
Do no harm.
We've been programmed that it's first do no harm.
Right.
The Hippocratic Oath is not first do no harm. Look it up. If you look it up, you'll see that it is an oath to 4 satanic gods. So then you'll start seeing, oh my gosh, this is spiritual. This is a satanic
even the
agenda.
Symbol.
Yes, even the symbol is satanic.
Yeah, there's a snake around the pole. And it's
exactly.
Just like, wow.
They're telling us, if we pay attention, they're telling us what they're going to do before they do it. But we have to have our eyes open.
So, Scott, I think a lot of people would push back and say, well, I have a cousin or someone I know who's a nurse. Someone I know works at the hospital. They have no intention of harming anybody. I'm sure you get that a lot. How do you respond to that? Because a lot of people go in with good intentions. They think they're helping people in the medical community. Go ahead.
I think some of them are genuinely helping people, especially ones that are awake to it and they have checked out of the system. So they've opened their own private practices. There's a number of them. There's now in Green Bay is one of the first private hospitals in the country. So people are waking up to it, and the doctors and nurses who have good hearts are getting out of the system because they realize that the system is controlling the standards of care, but the standards of care have become standards of death. All right, so then, how does it happen where there's a lot of them that are just have submitted to the system without realizing what is going on. And so you probably remember this term, the banality of evil. Yeah. So evil's so common you don't recognize it. Yeah. So, I've studied Down syndrome more than anything since Grace's death because Grace had Down syndrome. 90% of Down syndrome babies are murdered in the womb. Yeah. Why? How does that happen? Well, the couple is programmed to buy insurance. The couple's programmed to trust the white coat. So now they get pregnant. They come into the doctor's office and he says, congratulations on your pregnancy. Let's go ahead and schedule your amniocentesis. So without informed consent, which has become the new way they do things, they don't tell you what they're going to do, which we learned in Grace's case, of course. The couple just says, does my insurance cover it? Yeah. And so then they schedule the amniocentesis. It comes back and he says, it looks like you're going to have a boy and he's going to have Down syndrome. I recommend an abortion because he's going to be a burden on you. He's going to be a burden on society. All these lies under the spirit of collectivism, they've all been indoctrinated into this.
And yet, probably I'm just pulling this number out of the air, 95% of families that have a Down syndrome child are hugely, tremendously blessed and have absolutely no regrets. Maybe 97.5%. Maybe there are just a few for whatever reason, because it's a lot of work and a lot of effort, but my goodness. So going back, we've only got 3 minutes left, Scott. There was a nurse in Breaking the Oath from New York, I believe, that was awakened because of this. She saw the protocol. She saw that there was an intentional effort to kill people.
Yes.
And she was shocked. She got out of the business, or maybe she's on private practice now. Let's continue to talk about this and raise awareness, help my brother Scott. Let's get to your T-shirts real quick before we run out of time.
So Nurse Erin is her name.
Nurse Erin.
I've become friends with her. She now lives in Florida. She is in her own private. She did not lose her nursing license, praise God, for speaking out. Because she was one of the first ones that was sounding the alarm to hospital murders. At that point, she thought it was just about COVID. Of course, now she's woken up to see this is way bigger than COVID. COVID simply exposed the agenda. So onto the shirts. Yes. Jessica was able to...
Your daughter, Jess.
Yeah, our daughter, Jessica, was able to work through with a vendor. Getting this stuff set up is a big deal. We actually had a vendor who said, we won't do your shirts because it's misinformation.
Controversial.
Yeah, so they wouldn't even do shirts. So anyway, we have a couple of them that I want to show. So
go ahead.
We can all do our part. Yeah. And so one part you can do if you don't have a platform like I have is you can wear shirts to get people engaged. So here's one that'll do it. Where am I supposed to show this?
Right to that camera.
Okay.
There we go. Unvaccinated lives matter. That'll get you banned on YouTube and Facebook.
It'll get people talking to you in the grocery store.
Yes,
that's for sure.
The T-shirts are good. You can't get banned wearing it. Well, I guess you could. Yeah. Will you survive a hospital stay? medicalmurder.net.
So you can get those on Grace's website. We just make $5 a shirt. It's not about the money. It's about getting the message out.
And you know what? I want to end on that note because I just mentioned what happened to my wife with the COVID jab, and on a video where I was being interviewed, and YouTube deleted it. It violated community standards. They took it off without asking any questions. So they will delete this information, friends. So the T-shirts are a good idea where people are going to see them, where they might not see a video because it gets taken down or censored. Scott, thank you for your tireless work and your pray, friends, again, for Scott's perseverance. And brother, it's always great to see you.
Oh, you too. God bless you, Dave.
Thanks for coming in. Oh, my goodness, guys, very important topic. We've got to keep the information out there. We will get discriminated against. We will get censored, maybe shadow banned, maybe a video deleted. Is that the worst thing in the world that could happen to us? Oh my goodness, social media clamped down on me because I tried to tell the truth. This is the day and age we're in, unfortunately. So please go to ouramazinggrace.net and do what you can, all right? This is not over. Just wait for the next emergency, right? And I'm not a prophet. God bless you, and as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.